Let's start and just walk through things without those strict divisions or sections, alright? Picture this: you're starting out getting into this platform, maybe because you've got some ideas that need organizing, or you've got some thoughts floating around in your head and you're wondering how to put them into something that makes sense. You're not here to just list out bullet points in a Word document, right? You're looking for a tool that helps you visualize stuff, connect things in ways that might not be obvious at first, and that's where something like LucidChart really starts to come in handy. When you're first getting into it, what you do is you go ahead and make yourself an account. Pretty easy. Go to their website, sign up, and boom, you're in. The whole process is simple. You're not filling out 50 forms, just basic stuff, maybe even use your Google account to speed things up. You get through that, and you're brought into the main dashboard or home screen, whatever you want to call it. And this is where things are laid out pretty cleanly. You'll see the recommended templates, stuff to get you started. But before we dive into that, let's think about why you're even here. Because at the end of the day, it's all about turning your ideas into something more tangible, something that's structured. So whether you're working on a personal project, mapping out a new business venture, or just trying to make sense of all the moving parts in a particular situation, this tool is going to help you see it clearer. Once you're in there, you'll notice there are templates, and these are a huge time saver. It's like when you're cooking but don't want to start from scratch. You grab a pre-made base and build from that. These templates are like that base. There are ones for mind mapping, strategy planning, brainstorming. Pretty much anything you could need to map out, it's got a template for it. You can go ahead, pick one that looks like it'll fit your needs, and start tweaking it. It's all drag and drop. You're not learning some complex tool that needs weeks of tutorials. This is designed to be intuitive. You click on a shape, drag it where you want it, type in your text, and there you go. But let's not make it sound too simplistic either. There's a lot of depth here if you want it. As you start laying things out, you're going to realize how flexible this platform is. Like, maybe you start with a simple idea board where you're jotting down a few concepts, but before you know it, you're connecting those ideas to actions, and those actions to outcomes, and suddenly you've built a whole strategy right there on the page. It's fluid, and that's what's cool about it. You're not locked into a rigid framework. It's like molding clay, things shift as you need them to. But at this point, you might be thinking, what if I want to start from scratch? What if I don't want to use someone else's template, but instead just map out my own thing from the ground up? You can totally do that. You just click New Document, and you're dropped into a blank slate. This is where you get to build something completely tailored to your project, without any preset structure. And it's pretty empowering, right? You start pulling in shapes from the toolbar, drawing lines to connect them, maybe grouping things together to represent different parts of the process, and suddenly, it's all coming together. It's like taking all those scattered thoughts you've been having and bringing them into a single space where you can actually see how they relate to each other. And speaking of relationships, that's a big part of what makes LucidChart useful. Because most ideas don't exist in isolation. One thing leads to another, which connects to something else, and before long, you've got this web of concepts that are all interlinked. LucidChart lets you see those connections in a way that you might not have seen before. You can draw out a line from one idea to another, and that helps you realize, oh, these two things are actually related in ways I hadn't thought of. It's that visual component that really opens up new ways of thinking. One thing to note is that LucidChart isn't just about you working alone, staring at your screen, mapping out your own ideas. Sure, you can totally do that if that's your vibe. But say you're collaborating with a group. Maybe you're part of a team and everyone's got their own part of the project to work on. LucidChart lets you collaborate in real time. You can share your document with others, and everyone can hop in, adding their own thoughts, making adjustments, leaving comments. It becomes this living, breathing thing that evolves as the project goes along. It's not static. You're not sending emails back and forth, attaching different versions of a document, trying to keep track of who changed what. Here, it's all happening in one space, in real time. Now, let's switch gears a little. Maybe you're the kind of person who likes to track progress, to see things laid out in steps. LucidChart can do that too. You can build timelines, flowcharts, whatever you need to keep an eye on how things are moving along. It's not just about brainstorming ideas. It's also about seeing them through. You can set up stages for different parts of your project, track who's responsible for what, and even build in timelines if you want to stay on schedule. It's all about taking what's in your head and giving it structure in a way that's easy to understand, not just for you but for anyone else who might be looking at it too. You're not locked into one way of thinking either. Say you start with a simple flowchart, but halfway through, you realize you actually need something more complex. No worries, you can switch it up, add more elements, make connections you hadn't planned on initially. It's all flexible. There's no wrong way to build these diagrams. As long as it makes sense to you, and whoever else might be looking at it, that's what matters. And here's something else that's worth mentioning. LucidChart isn't just about pretty shapes and lines. It also lets you link data from other sources, which can be a game changer if you're working on something more technical. Maybe you've got a spreadsheet full of numbers, or some other data set that's a bit dense. Instead of just throwing that data into a boring old table, you can integrate it into your diagram, making it way easier to understand and visualize. It's one thing to see numbers on a page. It's another thing entirely to see how those numbers interact with each other visually. As you keep working with LucidChart, you'll probably find that it becomes more and more a part of how you plan things out. It's not just a one-time use kind of tool. Once you get the hang of it, you'll start using it for all sorts of things. Maybe it's for work, maybe for personal projects, maybe even for organizing daily tasks. It's flexible enough that it can adapt to whatever you need it for. One of the most powerful aspects of LucidChart is that it makes it easy to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Sometimes when you're working on something, you get caught up in the details and lose sight of the overall goal. But when you've got everything laid out visually, it's easier to see how all the pieces fit together. You can zoom out, look at everything at once, and get a sense of where you're at. Then, when you need to, you can zoom back in and focus on the smaller details again. It's a great way to balance the big picture with the finer points. But don't think you need to use it in one specific way. Everyone's got their own style of working. Maybe you're someone who likes to keep things super organized, with everything color-coded and labeled. Or maybe you're more of a free thinker, just throwing ideas onto the board and seeing what sticks. Either way, LucidChart can adapt to your style. You're not forced into a box. If you like things neat and tidy, you can set up your board that way. If you prefer a bit of chaos, that works too. It's your space to make sense of things in the way that feels best for you. And when it comes to sharing your work, you're not limited to just keeping everything in LucidChart. If you need to present your ideas to someone else, maybe in a meeting or as part of a proposal, you can export your diagrams in a bunch of different formats. PDF, image files, whatever works best for you. You can even break it down into slides if you're putting together a presentation. It's all about making sure the work you've done can be easily shared with others in whatever format makes sense for the situation. When you're ready to wrap up your project, just save it and it'll be there waiting for you next time. You can come back to it, make updates, and keep building on it. Nothing is set in stone. That's one of the great things about working digitally. You're never locked into one version of anything. There's always room for changes, improvements, and new ideas. By now, you're probably getting a sense of how useful this tool can be for organizing, planning, and collaborating. But the thing to remember is that LucidChart is more than just a drawing tool. It's a way to bring your thoughts into the real world, to see how they connect and evolve over time. It's not just about creating something visually appealing, although that's definitely part of it. It's about clarity, about making sure that what's in your head gets translated into something tangible, something you can act on. Alright, let's just take a second to reflect on how this kind of tool can impact your workflow. Whether you're working on something small or large, personal or professional, having the ability to lay everything out visually can make a huge difference. It's not just about getting things down on paper, or in this case on the screen. It's about seeing how everything fits together, how one thing leads to another, and how you can move forward with a clear plan. LucidChart is there to help you make sense of all the moving parts. Whether you're working alone or as part of a team, it gives you the tools you need to turn your ideas into something real. So go ahead, dive in, start experimenting, and see where it takes you. The possibilities are endless, and the only limit is your imagination.